Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by Onyx Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is Onyx Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, Onyx Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust Onyx Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about Onyx, go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbly's rifle. I've been rocking their Koda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbly's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbly's rifles, go to kelbly.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mack sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbly Rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I am joined by a fellow warrior in the woods and somebody who I've been wanting to get on the podcast, it seems like since 2020, and just things never actually worked out. Well, today we finally had the stars align, and we got our guest, Scott Reekers from Eastman'S Hunting Journal, on the podcast to talk about everything from hunting to managing relationships, dynamics, our passions, and so much more. So without further ado, Scott, my man, how you doing, brother?
Doing well. Just living a dream in Northwest Wyoming.
Dude, you live in a beautiful part of the country.
We really do, and I got lucky because my parents moved out here in the early '80s into Western Wyoming.
Yeah.
And so they got here at the right time. Because it's like real estate is expensive, and if you didn't start out here, it's hard.
Yeah.
And so when they moved to Southwest Wyoming, and then be able to get established here and build life, that sort of thing, it's tough. But now we're here, we enjoy it, and it's cool. My wife reminded me the other day. She's like, "We're gonna drive through Yellowstone. I know you're a Wyoming native, and you don't think anything of Yellowstone because you've been there all the time or whatever." She's like, but people literally pay thousands upon thousands of dollars to go see Yellowstone, and that's in our backyard. So we're going to make sure our kids enjoy it. I said, fair enough. So good perspective, honey. That's why I married you.
I love it. I think probably since 2020, I've been there 2 or 3 times already.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's that, like going to, Montana, Wyoming, national parks is a huge thing in my family. We talked about before we started recording about camping and the dynamic with children and all that. So,
oh yeah.
I can't believe just yesterday one of the geysers blew up.
I saw that. It's one of those, like, okay, so I'm going to admit this. I probably shouldn't say this on a podcast, but whatever. Like, we live the tourist thing now. Granted, Powell's not as bad as, closer you get to the park down the road in Cody. But man, why did those people that were in the video not run further?
Right.
What was going on? I'm watching them, and I'm like, oh my word, this is how the Darwin Awards came to be.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Like, that mother that's calling her kids, I'm like, stop looking, run. You
Yeah.
don't know how far this thing is going to go. And that's boiling water.
Throwing
Like,
rocks and mud and like, yes.
like, what is move, keep going. It'll still be pretty 200 yards further away.
Right.
So,
I'm sure it's a lot like Old Faithful where they build the ring around it and they're like, all right, everybody, have a seat and just watch it. Like,
yep,
no,
yep,
don't do it.
yep. So
Oh, man.
I didn't get to read it yet. I bookmarked it, but there's an article that or apparently in this article it details other holes and sinkholes and things like that have actually done that in the past. So this is not it's not necessarily unique. It's just we live in that social media age where this is the first time where it really got caught on camera, something getting blown up in Yellowstone. So anyway, that's interesting to me. So
I love it. I love it. Well, brother, what with you working at Eastman's and hunting season on the horizon? We're wrapping up, potentially, depending on where you live in this country, family vacations and
yep.
starting to put our sights on hunting season. What's that dynamic like in your world? Because I know for me, being within the hunting space and also being a family man and a father of 3 children,
Yep.
hunting never ends. And even when it's not hunting season, I'm thinking about it. But we
Yep.
got to make sure we maintain healthy relationships with our spouses and we're present
Yep.
with our families. How do you go about that?
Well, trial and error would be the best way.
Ain't that the
Um,
truth?
there's, I can, my wife would tell you there have been hunting seasons where I've been better at it. There are also hunting seasons where I've been terrible at it. Um, there's a fine line of knowing what is too much. A lot of a lot of people, especially in the social media age, um, unfortunately, they're placing their value in, well, I'm a hunter, you know,
Hmm.
whereas, dude, I'm just, Dan Picar and I had this conversation a while back. He and I were actually on an elk hunt of mine. It was tail end of November. We had waited for weather to come in to get the elk moving, and he and I had a side by side. We went through two belts. It ran, but the like something was off, like with the balance on the clutches, and so it burned through two belts really quick.
Wow.
And so we got to walk out, um, and walk out. I mean, another guy came and picked us up. Like he was an outfitter in the area that we knew. He was up there hunting too, but he was hunting the unit right next to mine.
Yeah.
But like you hunt the border kind of deal. So that said, he comes and picks us up, but Dan and I had time to talk on the way, and we're both like, at the end of our life, our family is going. They're not going to talk about the size of the animals we killed, but it'll be the time they spent with us.
Hmm.
Like at our eulogy, they're going to be. And he was a prolific hunter. That's all that's going to get said
Right.
about our hunting.
Right.
Um, and so, prolific hunter or passionate hunter, loved mule deer. That I'll get something of that nature. Um, and so in saying that, like trying to, when I'm looking at, like, I sat down and actually wrote this, like, okay, at the end of my life, what do I want? What do I want to, if I can look, what do I want to see at my funeral?
Hmm.
Number one, I want my family to know that I cared about them. Not that I was perfect, but uh, that I cared about them. I want my wife to know that I loved her, and I loved her more than I could stand. Um, and number two, I want like I want them to know where that love comes from.
Hmm.
Like in that, it's not me that loves them, but it's my relationship with Christ that fuels that love for them and for the way that we do things. Um, and so that is number one, and so obviously like my relationship with God has to come first, and then I align all my priorities in the midst of that. um but part of it is I have to be intentional with aligning my priorities, and so that begins and ends with a calendar. um there are two places where I can show you where your priorities are at. The number one place is in your checkbook. Like if you were like if your checkbook doesn't align with your priorities, guess what? Or what you say are your priorities, that's not your priorities.
Right.
Um, so then number two is I can look at your calendar and tell you where your priorities are.
Mm.
Now, um, if like I'm I'm not a naturally organized person.
Yeah.
Like I'm just not. Okay. Like that's something I struggle with. It's something that I have to work hard at. But half the battle is identifying your weaknesses. But what I have to do is I have to like every single day I have to make it a habit. I look at my Google Calendar.
Hmm.
I look at what's on the list. Like, like yesterday when we're trying to set up this time, I was able to pop into my Google Calendar, tell you this is when I can do this.
Yeah.
It's just pretty simple, straightforward in that regard. So that said, you know, your calendar will show your priorities. And then there's also a balance that you have to measure that. I heard David Platt a while back, and I don't follow this, but I kind of mental noted that like, okay, this is how he does it. He he put it that he has, I believe, 21 blocks. Give me 2 seconds here while I roll up that window.
Yeah, no worries.
He has roughly 21 blocks of time um, per week, and he wants those split into thirds. A third is personal life, a third is work, and then a third is taking taking care of like personal stuff. Personal life being family, and whenever he sees that those are off balance in those thirds, like looking at these different blocks that he's created in his calendar, life is off. But
Mm.
it gives you a great way. Like physically, you can count them.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a good way to look at it. So I can look at um, if I'm looking at my calendar and I see that there's a balance of family events, number one,
Yeah.
I'm meeting my work obligations, um, and then as well as church obligations because we're really active in our church. I mean, that's just what we do and who we are. Um, and again, that stems from our relationship with the Lord. Um, but like there are certain things that are non-negotiables. So my wife and I said that family dinner is always going to be a priority with
Mm.
us. Always going to be a priority with us. Is it stressful sometimes to figure out things to cook? Yes. Does dad end up cooking pizza sometimes? Yes. You know, but we sit down at the table and eat together. Um, book by Tony Evans a while back that I read. Um, he talks about how if you want to lead your family as a man, the best place you can do that is from the table.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And I'm not quoting him perfectly. That's a flaw of mine. I can't remember quotes directly, but I can tell you the principle that somebody talked about. Um, so when Tony Evans talked about that, he talked about like when he needed to course correct his children, um, they did it at the dinner table, not to embarrass them in front of the other kids or anything like that. But a lot of times the behaviors came up at the table. His wife didn't have to tell him necessarily, be like, "Look, you need to fix this" or anything like that, or you need to fix it with them. It's just how'd your day go, and they talk about it and comes up and things that you can course correct. But we do we do a couple of things to just maintain the right priorities with our kids. Number one, they each have a day that they pray at the table. They
Mm.
open us up in prayer at dinner. um, we've set that up. I grew up with that, but like with 4 kids, our schedule is a little bit different. So like I'll pray on Sunday, firstborn Monday, second Tuesday, et cetera, and then Rachel closes the week. Like so, we've got that. But one of the things that we've made a habit, and it's honestly it's a learning curve constantly because I've got one child who is 8 and one who is 3,
Mm.
and two in between. So like, how do you read a family devotional for that?
Right.
Um, so like, what we do is um, I'll read, like we just use the Bible app and we do the verse of the day and we go around and we memorize it. Like it's not a same verse all week long, anything like that. It's just we're going through that verse. I have them repeat it after me. Um, and so because because they repeat it and because they've made scripture like we're literally doing our best to lay scripture on their heart. That helps with the priority of we've centered our lives around scripture from the table. So now where does that tie into when hunting season arrives and I'm gone a lot? Well, it's harder to be around the table, but Rachel still cooks.
Hmm.
That's a deal. She still cooks. She still, she still has that. She does her best. How do we balance that with activities? I'm just going to be real honest. Sometimes I really do not like how many activities we get our kids into because they disrupt that time at the table.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, and there's a fine balance. We've got a rule now. Like, I don't know who told us this rule, but like our children can only do one activity at a time.
Hmm.
You do not play multiple sports at a time. It doesn't serve any benefit. I coached hockey a long time ago. The kids that I saw that were in all the sports all the time, they weren't good at anything. Um, but if you played baseball during the summer and hockey during the winter, life was good.
Right.
Or wrestled in the winter, baseball in the summer, like that's okay, but one at a time where you could actually focus, like you can go play catch with dad out in the yard.
Yeah.
Um, so that's there. Um, now now back to like I do travel a fair amount. I don't travel as much as like Ike and Brandon do. But their kids are also a little older too. So they give, Ike gives me a little bit of leeway on like does this work? Like, he'll talk about, okay, sometimes there's stuff I have to go to,
Hmm.
like that's, but like sometimes if I talk to them, like, hey, we had this event already planned, is I'll make different arrangements if I need to. And they'll be like, no, we can figure this out, so like it's good to work for a boss that he knows that if family life is off, work life will be off.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of places don't get that. A lot of places don't understand that. But that's the benefit of working for a small business and working for somebody who has like-minded beliefs like I do. Um, and so you've got that family piece of the equation. Now, one of the things that has changed is like I got married at 28, but my wife was 21. So we were, we've got a significant difference. So she was on the young end of the spectrum. I was on the quote unquote older end of the spectrum. You know, um, but one of the things that I had to learn was just how to do things a little bit differently. So I'm getting into hunting. So I'm kind of going all over the place. But I'll try and tie this all back together.
I
So
love it, by the way.
uh, So I used to be able to, especially like when I lived in Southwest Wyoming, and everybody knows Region G and Region H, famed mule deer areas. Um, I used to be able to be in the mountains like in an hour and a half.
Mhm.
I could be at my trailhead and heading up to where I'm going to scout. It did not bother me to leave at 8 o'clock at night after a church event when I was a full time youth pastor, hit the trailhead, and then hike, pitch the tent at midnight, and be up glassing at 5:30 in the morning scouting,
Yeah.
and be able to do. And then I could get an effective 24 hours of scouting in and go home. When I got married, I could still do that because my wife had jobs and different things that were like, she was doing and tied into life there. Um, but moving here to work for Eastman'S and do college ministry and tie all those things together, um, one of the things that changed is I wasn't like I'm a mule deer guy. And region G and H are where you want to go in Wyoming if you want to do that. Now, granted, I've got that on pause because how bad the winter was 2 winters ago. Um, but with that said, I love going over there and doing that. But um, I figured out that it was better for me to take a week in the summer and actually go scouting, like a full week where I dedicate a week to scouting, and that's what I found.
Huh.
I'm not looking for better. Like what I found during that week, that's what I'm going to hunt. And then if I didn't find something that week, then you go in blind somewhere and just do your best. But that said, I feel like there was one summer a while back. I found a 210 non-typical. to my knowledge, this buck never was killed. Um, and so I hunted him that year. I hunted him hard. Um, but after 4 days of watching him or 3 days of watching him, Brandon Mason and I were like, dude, we've got a 210 here and two 180s. Um, why are we gonna? Why would we finish out this loop? Go look for a bunch of other bucks. We know what we needed, so we bailed out. So like the priority was we found what we needed, we found what we wanted, and there was literally no more patterning I could do of this buck. Like he was in the same spot. It was August, so I came back Labor Day weekend for a quick bonsai scouting trip. Found him again. Um, and I ended up that year, I ended up killing a big 3x3 because we never found the 210. I found the 3x4 that he was with. A big 3x4. He'd have been a high 170s 3x4. Like, I mean, he
Wow.
was a big buck too. Yeah. Um, but all that said and tied together, it was that week long scouting trip. I was like, we don't need to stay here longer. Like I've got kids' activities at home I can be at, but I literally found what I was looking for. Um, my masculinity is not going to be measured by how many days I spent in the woods.
Mm.
Um, you know, quite frankly, if you're measuring your masculinity or your performance as a hunter by the number of days that you're in the woods, you're creating an idol for yourself that can come crashing down. Because if you build your identity, like if you build your identity on the things that you do, not who you were created to be in Christ, you're going to come crashing down. I mean, that's just how that works. Like I'm, and that's part of understanding that priority is like anything, anything that you become prideful or arrogant about. And I'm speaking to myself here, like we don't realize that we start worshiping stuff. This is what it is. It's our human nature, and we have to fight that constantly. Um, and so, you know, like going home a few days early didn't change my masculinity or make me less of an effective hunter. It was I found what I was looking for, and I'm gonna come back and find what I was looking for again.
Yep.
And I still ended up killing one of the bucks in the area that I scouted. He's probably the oldest buck I've ever killed. In fact, I'll send you a picture of it because I'm assuming it's thumbnails that you use, so that'll be one of them.
Yeah.
Um, but he was like, I never found the 210. We hunted hard for a week. Um, but like as my kids get older, it's a little easier to be gone a little bit longer. It's a little easier for my wife. Um, but we've done our best to like I get the hunts on the calendar. So there's enough time for her to prepare.
Hmm.
Because if she needs extra help with childcare, and my parents are here, they help her, but they're also getting older too. So if you've got to have enough time where my mom and dad need a break, from the kids, well, then we have to time all that right and do all these things.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect at it. Like my wife would tell you that there are times I forget to put stuff on the calendar, and I like my Google calendar.
You're
She
saying,
likes the physical calendar. So like I have to take my Google calendar, look at it. But she's honestly getting better at putting things in the Google calendar too. She's been and making sure that like if it's an event I need to be at, she sends me an invite, things of that nature, so that like I can put it on my calendar and protect it from things like Johnny Mack calling me about a podcast.
right.
That's just that's how I have to manage and do those things.
Yeah.
So
Well, communication is the key to every successful relationship, right? Like we have
100%.
to communicate. It was really interesting. I want to go back to a few things that you said throughout this because it brings up a lot of questions I have, but at the same time, it brings up some interesting things. Number one, ego can always ruin stuff, right? Like when we let our ego get in the way, it it can be a great motivator, but it can absolutely be the worst detractor to our relationships back at home.
Yep.
With that being said, you also talked about serving somebody, like being an idol. Like
Yep.
when you serve after an idol or you lust after an idol, or you wrap up your identity. I actually did a
Yep.
episode 100, I believe. I did an episode called "What You Do Is Not Who You Are."
Yep.
And that is something that people get, caught up in. They don't know who they are, their identity.
Yep.
It's like, well, I'm Johnny Mack, I'm a hunter, or I'm a school teacher, or I'm, like, no,
Yeah.
know who you are, because what you do isn't who you are.
Yep. 100%.
Bob Dylan, Bobby D, he wrote a song, "Gotta Serve Somebody." I'm going to read off a couple lyrics right here, real quick, just to share, because it says, "You may be an ambassador to England or France. You may like to gamble, or you may like to dance. You may be the heavyweight champion of the world. You might be a socialite with a long string of pearls, but you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody."
Yep.
And it's that song right there is talking specifically about what you're
Yep.
addressing, where as a man, as a human being, as a part of this world that we have a responsibility to, what are we going to be serving? Because we're going to be serving
Yep.
something. And
100%.
and as a husband, as a father, as a leader, we have a responsibility to set an example. And what I've learned, especially with social media and what you talked about with Yellowstone and the explosions, is somebody's always watching.
100%.
Somebody is always watching, whether
100%.
watching to see you stumble, whether watching you to
Yep.
see you succeed. It's really fascinating. I love that
It
you
is.
you have the wherewithal to reflect upon that, because that's extremely important.
Well, and I can't take credit for that. I mean, I've had a lot of good mentors that have helped me over the course of time. Like one of the things we struggle with, like as men, is we like to take credit for a lot of the things that we didn't actually do. But like, you know, early, I'll give this as an example, like because there's I've got a bunch of them, and maybe I have time to talk about a bunch of them. But like, guy that I worked for when I was in Texas, I was his youth intern, um, and dude, my ego was full bore from age 20 to 22 when I was there. Um, but there were like working with him, he did his best to model Christ. Like we actually ran into people. Like he'd be embarrassed if I'm telling this story, but that's okay. Um, we would run into people at events like they've still got Super Summer in Texas. I'm sure you've seen advertising and things like that for it. So it's Super Summer was a leadership camp. It was a good event back then. I have no idea what it's like now. But because we're talking circa 2002 to 2006, that's how long ago I was in Texas.
Uh-huh.
So things can change. But anyway, that's whole different story. But it was you brought your best leaders to Super Summer, like in a youth group, and it was intense. It wasn't your usual camp. I mean, there was a lot of worship. You went through an entire book and during your week with the students. Like it was a leadership camp. It was not a fun camp. We had a fun camp that we went to later in the summer. But the leadership at Sunday's camp, or at Super Summer, I'm sorry, Sunday's camp was the fun camp. But the leadership at Super Summer, they would find out that I worked for Cabin. They're like, "What's that like?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Is he like crazy or something?" They're like, "Nah, dude, that's like working with Jesus, isn't it?" I'm like, "Well, never thought of it that way, but yeah, he leads really, really well." And yes, he made mistakes, and yes, he would tell us if he made a mistake and apologize, but that's still following the example. Like Christ never made a mistake, but he taught us, make things right with the people that you're around. And sometimes that's, admitting you made a mistake. So like that was a good example, but people were always watching even back then, they were watching Rick. And then, I learned really quickly because I was working for Rick, and honestly I was working for Christ, but you know
Yeah.
I was his intern. That you get all that. But like by extension they were watching me harder, because they're like, if Rick endorsed this kid, what's there? you know and I was a kid at 20 to 22. You think you're not, you think you know all sorts of things, when reality is when you're that young you don't know anything, you don't realize you don't know anything.
Right.
it's just that you just haven't been around the sun long enough to experience it. It's like, and then
There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom comes with
100%.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And so, like, there was always gentle correction, but there was one time, like, this is, I'm dating myself here. I just turned 40 last fall, about to turn 41 in September. But this guy that I was working with, he's a good friend of mine. He was copying CDs. Like, like I
Yeah.
did it.
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't think anything about it. I had stopped because I kind of had some personal convictions about it, but it wasn't a hill I was going to die on. Um, you know, and so this guy asked Rick, "Hey, can I borrow that CD? I want to make a copy of it." And Rick just goes, "Well, that's stealing, brother." And this guy goes like, "Oh, they've got plenty of money." And then Rick, without missing a beat, goes, "Is the Lord going to bless that though?" And I was like, "Ouch!"
Gut punch.
Like,
Wham.
yeah, like because like I'd stopped copying CDs, and I'm like, "Oh, it's kind of stealing," like, but that iterated with me that like, no, this is how the Lord looks at that,
Mhm.
and so honor God in you don't just honor God in the big things, the public things, but the little things and the little consistencies are where the Lord is going to bless you. Um, and it's hard. It's not easy. Um, like that's one of the things that like with our college ministry, we've tried to be real with our college students. I hate the term being real. Okay. Like, but
Because aren't we just
um,
supposed to be real the entire time?
oh yeah. Yeah. Like that means we're all putting up fake facades, which truthfully a lot of times we are. Um, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, but like we've tried really hard with our college students to let them see that, dude, marriage isn't just some rose bed. Okay, like marriage is hard. It is a lot of work. Um, you are going to have conflict with your spouse. Now that doesn't mean we're gonna have a knockdown drag out in front of them like that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is being very real with them. Like, look, marriage is work.
Mhm.
And if you're not working on your marriage, if you're not working to better your marriage, because college students are looking to get married, when you're doing ministry with them, and so showing them that marriage is work and kind of getting back to that balance, like have people in your life that can course correct, have people in your life that will tell you when your work life balance is off.
Yeah.
Um, as men, subject yourself to authority. Like what you just said with that Bob Dylan, quote. Um, if you are a man who will not subject himself to authority, I like that is not going to be a good thing in the sense that there will be a crater that falls.
Mhm.
Like Ike reminds us on a pretty regular basis. It's like, sure, I'm your boss here, but the subscriber is actually your boss. Like the subscriber is telling us what they want to see, what they want to hear, what they want us to talk, how they want us to behave. Um, and so we've had some good reminders. Like one of the reasons I like working for Eastman is we've got the birdie rule. The Eastmans are not perfect. Okay, I could be embarrassed if I said he's perfect. Okay, that's just they're not. They're humans. They're like me and you. But one of the things that they established was the birdie rule, where you will never see alcohol, tobacco, or inappropriate male enhancement ads, anything like that inside of Eastman's because kids read it.
Yeah.
You know, and Ike will be like, he's like, like I'm not. He's like, I've lost money because I've had alcohol and tobacco want to advertise with us, and I just won't do it. He's like, I don't want a dad sitting there with his kids having to explain, what a cigarette is for the first time to his 4-year-olds because of my magazine.
Right.
You can There's plenty of places where that can happen, but it's not going to be the magazine that I'm putting out.
Mhm.
That's the Birdie rule. If Birdie Eastman, which is Mike Eastman's wife, if Birdie Eastman would not approve that ad, I can't sell it. Or I can't use that space.
Yeah.
But again, that's subjecting ourselves to the authority because people have grown accustomed to that not being an Eastman's. And so because that stuff's not in Eastman's, if there's anything that ever pushes the line or anything of that nature, they'll tell us,
Yeah.
you know. And so that is a good reminder that subject yourself to the authorities, um, because, unless it goes against compromising biblical principles, but being willing to subject yourself to authority will make you better. Being a defiant person is not going to serve you well in life. That like I think I was listening to this is actually kind of a good, I'm not endorsing any theology. People make mistakes, things like that. But I was listening to Carrie Newhoff and a Matt Chandler podcast, and Matt Chandler was talking about one of his book, The Overcomers, where he was talking about like we're in a everybody is in a state of outrage right now. Like, look at social media. I mean, look at attempt on President Trump,
Yeah.
and like everything that's been going on the last few days. Like, dude, where's Joe Biden? Is he hiding in the basement again?
Right.
Like speculation that he's dead. Like apparently he's going to address the nation tonight. I don't know, but we live in this constant state of outrage, and one of the premises that Matt Chandler was making on this podcast, where he was talking about his new book, The Overcomers. I haven't read the book, not endorsing the book, anything like that. But I'm just talking about the principle. What he was talking about is that, you know, when Rome's when Rome started its path towards Christianity, it was the steadiness of the Christians that led them there. When you think about the persecution that happened during the Roman Empire, you didn't have these giant Christian revolts. um, you know, a lot of times it was actually the Christian marriages that were leading people to Christ, because you have these families that are in disarray inside this Greco-Roman system.
Hmm.
And then you look, and then they see these Christian marriages where a husband is commanded to love his wife. That's very different than the Greco-Roman marriage as a political system. And so the principle was that, like, okay, what does this look like where Christians are not the norm anymore, but they're having an influence on society? And that was the point that was being made with that, um, with that statement, was like, how can we be an influence, like overcoming the hard situations, but be steady influences in our culture. And I think that's one of the places that we can be examples to our society and our culture through our families, the way we lead out in our families, our work life balance. Those are going to be the things that people see on a daily basis. um, and then also, like, being active in your church, like beyond just showing up on a Sunday, but like, you like, one of the hardest things to find is small group leaders.
Hmm.
you know like, you can host, somebody else can teach, but if you can host a small group, like, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, let me draw a parallel real quick to the hunting world, because what you're
Mhm.
saying is it ties so well. It's a metaphor, like 100%.
Yeah.
You're saying, be active in your church, be active in your
Mhm.
community. And if you
Yep.
are a hunter, be active in the hunting community, and don't
Yep.
just set and wait for somebody else to take action.
Yep.
The other thing with that being said is, give me just a second. Case, what's up, buddy? Okay, go, and then only a couple sheets, bud. That was my youngest right there. He just turned 5
Nice.
yesterday. Um,
Nice.
so the let's see, where was I? Oh, being active in your community. My mission is mentorship is conservation. If you want hunting to
Yep.
last for generations to come, you got to invest in the
Yep.
hearts and lives of other people. Well, the biggest thing that I find when it comes to hunting mentors is that they don't feel like they know enough to be able to teach somebody else.
Yeah.
And that goes to what you're saying is like small group leaders. Well, I don't know if I know the Bible good enough, or if I know this good enough to. You don't have to know anything other than the fact of how powerful something is to transform lives, whether it's
Yep.
the Bible, faith, religion, hunting, whatever you really support.
And I'll tie this a little bit together with the hunting world. I've used hunting more as a tool for mentoring and discipleship than anything else.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'll use this as a good example. when I was full-time youth pastor, there were a couple of guys I hunted with all the time. They were from my church. Um, One of them, like he needed a friend at the time. He didn't necessarily need me to be a Bible thumper, but he just needed me there on the trail when he needed to ask questions about scripture. Um, and so he and I hunted together a lot. We had a pretty brutal pack out together once. That was pretty entertaining. Um, but we left like on a Friday night, came back on a Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 24-hour trip. We just backpacked into a small area. He killed a spike elk, and then we packed it out together. But it was a great trip. The next weekend, we had a couple other guys from our small group that we did the same thing with. Um, and we literally did life together. And we live in a place where, going and doing Western style hunting was a great opportunity to do that. Um, I have used duck hunting as a great opportunity to spend time with people who like they need my time, and doing ministry together and being able to use those tools. And now they're doing the same thing, whether it be with their kids or whether it would be with someone else. Um, Now tying into the conservation world, um, you know, I believe God put us here to take care of His creation. The word "subdue" does not mean subdue the earth. Does not mean rape and pillage. There's a huge difference there. Um, so when we subdue the earth, like, dude, I don't think we're doing a good job subduing the earth when I'm looking around and I'm seeing all this smoke. You know, to me, what that means is we are we're not subduing. We should have been spending a lot of time working on, okay, how do we do controlled burns that prevent these things? How do we go about working on the habitat for the animals? And sometimes that's going to mean the logging.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the best you know some of the best areas that I've ever hunted are old logging roads.
Yeah.
Like, so this whole premise that we do that, well, like, you know as a believer, as somebody who's mentoring, I firmly believe that we should make our voices heard on those things.
Yes.
um and and by our lives living an example, we'll see bigger things. Like, not everybody's going to hunt,
Yeah.
dude. I mean, that's just not, it's not a reality. But if they see people who are claiming to be Christians, but, like, it our behavior in the field, does not represent Christ, why would they ever vote in favor of us?
Right. Right.
You know, um, because, like, Colorado now, they're moving to ballot box biology like crazy, which is dumb. But that,
Yep.
like, don't, like, by the masses, let's vote for wolves. Well, I mean,
Well,
Wyoming can tell you there are plenty of wolves already crossing the border.
well, let's talk about that
You
for a
didn't want.
second because
Okay.
this ties all into what we've already been in line with. How we show up in the world, and people are always watching.
Yep.
We also need to understand and learn that we need to be courageous, not be led by fear.
Yep.
And if this world is truly coming to ballot box biology, the
Yep.
best thing that we can do as hunters and as human beings is to spread the gospel of how important and impactful it is to our lives and the lives that we
Yep.
interact with. And so, if we can share this message and we can share the good news and proclaim, like, this is nature and this is how my life is renewed and my soul is renewed and I'm connecting with my creator. And then,
Yep.
even if somebody doesn't hunt, if they know you and they know your story and they know the impact that you're having within your community, then that
Yes.
can be enough to sway them on the ballot box biology, right?
Yep.
We need to connect with the heart of humanity for it to turn that switch or to hook them and be like, okay,
Yep.
I'm not a hunter, but you know what? Scott is a hunter and he's a really good person. He's doing really good things in this community, and I don't want to take that away from Scott. And so because of that, I'm going to vote
Yep.
no. Or,
Well, and then they might vote no because they respect our opinion.
Yeah.
because of the way we live. Um, and that's we all have things that are near and dear to us. Everyone has a cause, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
Um, you know, like I'll pick on gamers. I am not a gamer. I never have been. I didn't even grow up with a Nintendo, dude. Like that's how
Nice.
non-gamer I am. Okay. My dad looked at it, he's like, we're not gonna live that. We're not going to live that life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so instead of shooting like guns on James Bond, that's the era that I grew up in, the original James Bond
Oh yeah, the
multi-person.
golden eye. Yep.
Oh yeah, GoldenEye. While my friends are all playing that, my dad was a police officer and he's out like, we're actually going to go shoot guns, and so like we did that sort of thing. And I value that now because that's time I spent with my dad.
Hmm.
you know how sad would it be to look at our lives and think, man, GoldenEye ripped time with my family away?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hate to say that, like I've been guilty of it. Instagram does it.
Oh
you know
yeah. Oh yeah.
like I I used to run all our social media here at Eastman's, and I still help with it. It's still part of my daily routine to check and help where needed. But I've gotten to the point where I kept an old phone, and I try and delete Instagram I'll use it on the weekends sometimes, things like that. But like during the week, I try and delete Instagram. Sometimes even Facebook if I find myself scrolling through Marketplace too much.
Hmm.
Whatever thing I'm thinking about buying, that I've made sure the algorithm knows by saving a few of them. Um, like I've deleted it a few times recently because to me that's made sense. And so like then the other thing is when I keep it on that old phone, I've made it a task to go look through social media, not well, I'm bored or I
Yeah.
need that little dopamine kick,
Yep.
you know. So I'm trying to do that more. I haven't gotten it all the way figured out, like how to balance that, manage it. Um, but anyway, that's where that's at for me, is like those things. What what value did I add to life by spending that extra 20 minutes scrolling reels on Instagram? Yeah.
Right.
Like,
W- Well,
and
let's go back to what you said at the beginning of the show was this idea of like, writing your own eulogy. So when we
yep.
begin, Stephen Covey wrote a book, Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, and one of those habits is to begin with the end in mind. And if more people actually identified and looked at their life with this whole idea of, what are people going to say about you at your funeral? Are they going to show up? Are they going to participate? What, or you writing your eulogy? Like how would you want to be remembered? They're not going to say, "Oh well,
Yep.
Scott killed this many big deer," or they're not going to have your mounts at your funeral, like surrounding your casket. The idea is then if we are constantly focusing on a goal, what we want, we
Yep.
need to identify what it is that we want, because when we identify what we want, then we can work towards achieving it and accomplishing it.
Yep.
Just like shooting a gun or a bow and arrow, man. If you don't have a target, that thing is
Yep.
never going to hit its mark, right? You send it into oblivion. But when we have a goal and we're focused and we are maintaining that heading, you betcha we're going to get there and we're going to
Yep.
make an impact and enjoy the ride that much more.
And when I can tell when I'm not goal oriented, and I can tell when I am goal oriented. Like now, part of the like part of the problem that we get is we don't realize that we stopped being goal oriented until we're 2 weeks down that off the path of where we wanted to head.
Yep.
Got distracted. Like we talked about vacations can throw off our goal orientation in a big way
Hmm.
because you have to completely reset everything of what you're thinking about, what you're doing when you get back. Like your whole routine was off. And so work trips do that to me as well. Um, where I have to realign, get back in the calendar. Like actually while I was on vacation, um, what it was a Craig Groeschel podcast that I was listening to. Um, and he was talking about goal. Actually, it was goal orientation. It was an old podcast, but I'm like, I need to sit down and look at my goals for 2024 to see how I'm doing on them, because I sit down and rewrite every year, like, like, not because I'm some like New Year's resolution hound, um, but it's more a I have the opportunity where it's just a good time to do it.
Hmm.
Plus, work and life, it sets fiscal years. There's a lot of that. Um, However, it doesn't work with our college ministry. I have to do that during the summer, just because that's when I don't have students here.
Yeah,
Um,
school year and calendar year are two different things.
they're two very different things. Um, So um, that said, like I sat down and said, okay, these are the things. It's a great opportunity to okay, now I'm gonna double down on dinner. Like we work 4 10s in the summer. Normally we try and eat about 5:30, like just because then sometimes there's activities afterwards you have to bring kids to. And,
Hmm.
like it works for us. Rachel grew up with that too. That's just part of it. You when That's one example of when you marry a person, you're also marrying their family. They don't talk about enough how you're also marrying that family's habits and decisions. Like I grew up eating at 6:30, but like with us working 4 10s, dinner time moves till to 6:15. That
Right.
drives my wife nuts because she feels like we're eating dinner way late. Um, but on the other end, I doesn't bother me because it feels normal to me.
Yeah.
Whereas during the school year, like, okay, 5:30 ish is a little easier to deal with.
I
So
I dated a girl whose parents ate dinner at 9 p.m. at night. And I was like, what the heck, man? Like,
that's way too late.
right.
Way too late.
Right.
So
Right. Hey,
so
here's a question for you. I wanna hit. You're a father of four children.
yep.
Congratulations, by the way. Um, now
Thanks. I
this
think.
yeah, right. Big work. This might be a little your answer is probably gonna differ from mine, but we all get to learn from each other, which is super powerful. So me being newer to hunting, I've had my hunting license for a decade. It wasn't, it's 2017. It's been 7 years, 8 years since I no, 7 years since I actually like got into hunting. I have these goals that I want to attain as a hunter. Because hunting is inherently
Yep.
selfish, even though we talk about it being a community-based thing.
Yep.
As I'm also a father of three boys, 9, 7, and 5. Managing this idea of hunting for me and my hunts, but then also time and managing hunts with my children to bring them into it, or have you started to like have some foresight towards how you plan on managing that?
Number one, just accept that you will never meet all your hunting goals.
Fair
Your
enough.
personal goals.
Yeah.
Um, Number two, like I'll just use this as an example. Okay. Um, I want to kill a 200-inch buck in the Wyoming high country. Okay, like it's a goal of mine. I know, I know, quote unquote, a lot of people who have done it, but they're the minority.
Hmm.
Okay, like um, I to do that, um, there's going to come this time where my body physically cannot go into the Wyoming high country.
Yep.
Like without horses, I've started using llamas, like on those trips, but like I've also reached this conclusion, like I have a population objective that I will not go hunt over there until the population objective is above a certain point. Like it's at 11,000 now. I've got a ways to go.
Hmm.
Um, just I'm just so there are going to be outside circumstances that make it harder. There are going to be outside circumstances that may make it unattainable. Um, Number one, I'm racing a clock. Number two is, dude, my oldest son, he he loves hunting. Now, he's 5 or almost 5. So is he is he looking at it from a perspective of I'm doing this because I really love it, or am I doing it because my dad does?
Right. Right.
Okay, so but like So there's a very real chance that I'm going to take him into the Wyoming high country, um, and we're going to kill a lot of 165 bucks. Now I'm going to make sure that like, and I've got two boys, so one is going to get to go obviously before the other, but like Ian's also got this jaded perspective too because his dad, he's seeing me at some of the peak of my trophy hunting career. Like he so so that said, um number one, be prepared to give up your own goals because if you realign your goals with them loving the things that should be the highest priority in their lives,
Hmm.
um, that's what's going to matter the most. You know, um, and will I break 200 in the Wyoming high country? I don't know. I'll probably break 200 at some point through different circumstances, different relationships, and maybe a private land hunt or something where that's an opportunity. But that's not my goal of the Wyoming high country.
Right.
You know, um, so like I have this intense desire where I really want to go kill I apologize, somebody just came running by behind the vehicle. Um I really want to go to South America and kill a free range red stag.
Cool.
Like, I really want to do that. But I look at the price tag for that and then I look at hmm, I could spend that money on something inside the house that will please my wife and take care of you know
Right.
take care of the higher priorities, or um or there's also an opportunity for my wife and I through church to take a mission trip, 5,000 a piece versus the 10,000 for me to take a single trip, and that's just the outfitter fees of the 10,000. Okay,
Right.
like just you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Like it's and bear in mind also that I started my hunting journey when I was in third grade. That's the first time my dad took me on a big game hunt. My dad got started later in life. Um, so if you want all your priorities to line up straight, because think about it like this, like I've heard this quote said a lot. There is there is no greater testament to who a person is than how their children turn out.
Mm.
And so if if my kids don't turn out well, but I spent 10 grand on just the outfitter fees for going to South America to kill a red stag.
Are you doing it
I'm
right?
like,
Yeah.
did I didn't do it right. Um, so it's now should would it be better for, same amount of money, like I could take my wife and I can be an example for my kids and go on a mission trip, or we can uh or we can do there's a variety of things we can do,
Hmm.
like that we can spend that money on that will have long-term impact. Balancing all those things is hard.
Hmm.
And so like and then the other thing is too, you're going to see my favorite hunt last year, and I did some pretty cool hunts last year. Like I killed a ridiculous for western whitetail. Like in the West, like if you break 160, you've done pretty good on a whitetail.
Yeah.
Okay, like you're probably not going to get better than that. I know Midwest bruisers, like people don't like. I won't shoot anything less than 170. Like, but north central Montana, I killed a really nice buck. It was through an outfitter relationship. However, like as much as I loved that hunt, as much as I loved hunting with my friend JD and Brandon Mason came along, Ike actually got to be there for part of it. As much as I love that hunt and that experience, the simple hunt where we went out in the evening and my son Ian was sitting there on a hay bale next to my dad, who's leaning over this big, big 1 ton hay bale.
Hmm.
Um, or he's leaning next to it and my dad shoots a doe. like a white-tailed doe next to a corn stand and all that good stuff. Um, Seeing Ian's excitement running up to that doe, standing there with my dad, I've got pictures of it. That was far more exciting than when I picked up what will probably be my best Western whitetail.
Yeah.
So if your priorities realign as you being a dad, um, like that matters because Ian's gone on those hunts, because now he's been exposed to a kill, he loves hunting.
Hmm.
Um, but like I don't want hunting to become his idol. I want it to be something that is a part of this life. That's a big part of his life. I make my living in the hunting space. Okay, like obviously I want it to be a big deal, but like finding this balance where like we're having conversations with him now where he's starting to put all the pieces together with like, okay, this is what I'm hearing at church. Dad, sin. Okay, so when I didn't listen to you, was that a sin? Like he'll ask me these questions. Like, yeah, buddy, like when you didn't do what you were supposed to. But tying this all together, that time spent in the field, where I'm, hey buddy, grandpa's about to shoot, watch over there, watch that deer, like where we're talking, developing a relationship, where I'm learning, like part of parenting that people don't talk about is you're learning who your kids are.
Yeah.
um and so that is one of those things where like that time spent we're learning who he is. Keeping those priorities straight is a big deal. um same with my wife. Like if I'm, we've got a rule. I don't get this right every single time, but at some point before or after a hunting trip or a work trip, Rachel and I take a date. Like we have to catch up.
Yep.
Just little things like that. If I'm doing a good job, I can tell.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a bad job, I can tell. And none of us like to admit that, dude, I'm doing a bad job at being a husband.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing a bad job at being a husband, I'm not going to enjoy my time in the field.
Nope.
I,
Nope.
I mean, just, and so if you want to reach your hunting goals, be a ridiculously good husband.
Yeah.
Um, and be a ridiculously good dad. That's something I've learned from Brian Barney. He's really good at like when he is working, he is working. When he's being a family man, he's being a family man. When he's recording the podcast, he's recording the podcast. Like he's very good at compartmentalizing. And that's one of the things I think that social media has really screwed up for us is that it's taken all these like get these little dopamine fixes, tie everything together, stop being goal oriented while
Yep.
you're at work, while like I really think that has screwed those things up in
Yeah.
a big way.
Yeah.
Uh, And so for me, it really just comes down to like keep your priorities straight. Your goals will work themselves out. Your goals might change. Like, and do I lose sleep over whether or not I'm going to kill a 200-inch Wyoming high country mule deer? Nope.
Right.
I don't. I fall asleep sometimes dreaming about it, especially if I've scouted one up. But I don't worry about whether, like, dude, I've got enough big bucks on the wall.
Yeah.
Like, and like my wife pointed out, she's like, yeah, the funny thing is you go every single year and you bring home another one, and it's once in a lifetime every year. And I'm like, uh-huh, it is.
Yeah.
You know, like this moment was once in a lifetime. But like elk are so big, I have no vaulted ceilings. I have no space for it, you know. But what I do, but at the end of all of that, looking at all that space and things of that nature, it's about the family pictures that are up there.
Yep.
An old guy pointed out to me, he's got a ridiculous trophy room. He's got a full size grizzly bear standing there that he killed in Alaska. But I noticed there was a point in time, and you can see it in his trophy room, where there's a lot more pictures on the wall than there are actually trophies.
Yeah.
And it's pictures of hunts and things that he did. I'm up there. That he's got a couple pictures of me and a few of my college students. We were out duck hunting with him. Um, but things changed for him,
Yeah.
as he got older, things got to be more important. Like who you went with, why you went with them, and the time you spent. So
Yep.
just that would be the biggest thing, is just be prepared that you there's a difference between hunting goals and hunting fantasies.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean,
Might have a podcast title after that one. Who knows?
maybe see what somebody else says about that one. So
Right. Well, brother, for the sake
um,
of time, because I want to honor you and our schedules and all that. Um, thank you so much for coming on the show
of course,
and sharing your heart and your passion and your zest for life and all things outdoors.
of
It
course.
it shows, right? And when we lead with love, we can do no wrong. Um,
Yeah.
just real quick, as long as you have like a minute or two,
Yep,
just
I do.
what how would you speak about what hunting has done for you in your life?
Well, um, I mean, there's the obvious, like I have a I have a job that takes care of myself and my family, most importantly. So hunting has done that. Now, um, I'll throw a disclaimer out there for anybody who thinks that it's like living the dream, guys. I am at a desk as much as you are.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't mean that I am out in the field. What you heard me talk about business development, like very beginning, like that's a real world job. Okay, um, it's an actual objective. A boot manufacturer spends more, like he doesn't spend all this time in the field testing boots. You know, there's a lot of time actually learning how to do those things. So like, um, but man, I lost my train of thought here. I went off on that tangent because people need to hear that. But like, what has hunting done for me? Um, Hunting has introduced me to a lot of my best friends. It's taught me patience. It's taught me, like there's the obvious thing, a lot like, okay, get out in nature, you can see it and you can see God's creation. Um, but like it goes beyond just seeing God's creation. It goes back to honoring God's creation. Um, to me, that is a huge piece of the equation of why we do it. Um, and being able to, like, it provides for the family in the sense of meat. My kids ask every single night, what kind of meat is this? Is it deer? Is it antelope?
Yeah, I love that
um,
question.
and I'm like, well, buddy, it's white, so that's definitely pork or chicken. Which do you think it is?
Yeah.
you know and so going through that, and it's really funny because, like, when we eat duck, they look at duck and they're like, "Well, it's dark, so it's got to be steak." I'm like, "No, this is duck." Um, and so it's funny doing those things, them learning about that process. Um, but all that said, hunting has given me, like, relationships with family. My dad and I spent a lot of time in the field when I was a teenager, a lot of time when I was a younger kid. That's where I really fell in love with it. Really, really got to enjoy it. Really got to think about what it is and why I wanted to do more of it.
Hmm.
Why those things were important to me. Um, so, I mean, there's that piece of the equation for sure. Um, I would also, I mean, yeah, there's so much that hunting has given to me. Um, it's given me opportunities to mentor people,
Hmm.
like use it as a tool to mentor people. Um, but end of the day, it's still something that kind of it gives more, like, I don't know, how do I even say this? Like, God created hunting and I get to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest thing there. And oddly, like, yeah, I think that's the best way to. I think that's probably the best way to state it. So
I love that. Brother, thank you for sharing. I want to just hit on something real quick that was
okay,
shared at the beginning of the podcast. We were talking about logging and some of your best hunting was done on
yep,
logging roads and
yep,
how when we need to take care of things better in that
yep,
regard. In the Bible, it says a tree will be known by the fruit it bears. And in order
yep,
for a fruit or fruit tree to bear more fruit, you have to prune it. And in
yep,
order to prune it means you got to cut it back. and you got to
Yep.
go through challenging, difficult, uncomfortable experiences. But through
Yep.
that, we produce the fruit. And that fruit is a gift and a blessing to humanity. And so if we take these biblical principles and apply them to hunting and land
Yep.
management and conservation and other aspects of our lives, when we really apply that, that is when we're going to make a difference and when we're going to see a greater reward through our efforts. So, man, brother, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for dedicating some time for me and the Soul Seekers podcast and Soul Seekers Nation. Good luck this coming hunting season. I want to get you back on anytime you want to talk about Eastman's Hunting Journal, the Tag Hub, any of that stuff. I want to get you on, and it's an open door policy with you, brother. Guys, go check out Eastman's Hunting Journal. Go to, Eastman's.com. And from there, you can access all the different podcasts that they do, subscribe to the magazines, so watch the shows, go to their online store, and so much more. So, Scott, brother, thank you so much. Anything you want to share?
Absolutely. Eastman's.com. Currently, we've got an offer right now where when you subscribe to Tag Hub for $99.99, you get a Everly Stock Bandit backpack with it. So it's Bandit. It's a great everyday carry piece. So you're more than welcome to, go there and see that. It's the top of Eastman's.com. You get the magazines with that. You get access to everything, you just talked about. So it's a great opportunity. That's the current special that we got going on right now.
I love it. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment and a review. That always helps push out our information and to connect with more people and to keep everything here at Soul Seekers going. Remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure and that you can never outgive good, as mentorship is conservation. For Johnny Mack and Scott Reekers of Eastman's, be blessed, freedom on, and as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.